Welcome to the Myofascial Magic in Action podcast. My name's Joanne Avison, and this is my beloved colleague, Paul Thornley. Hi, Paul. How you
Good
doing?
morning, Joanne. How the devil are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Giggling at all that we go through to put on this podcast.
Hmm.
Big love to everybody and blessings from us. So, today we're keeping a promise to do some techniques, tips, and tricks for Diastasis Recti. And if you haven't heard it, there's a whole podcast episode on this fascinating subject, and it links to female pelvic health and well-being. We bust some of the myths about what actually makes a difference. And for those of you that don't know, Paul and I are both movement teachers. Paul is one of the top instructor trainers in Pilates in the world, quite frankly. And I'm a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist with a yoga teacher training school. And so we've both got different experience, but of course, we've both come across a lot of these issues. And Paul, as a neuromuscular therapist, me as a structural integrator, we deal with soft tissue and neuromuscular issues in our clients. And very often we greet women who come to us with issues postpartum, pelvic floor pain, all sorts of variations on that theme. And very often doing exercises that are actually aggravating the tissue through a misunderstanding of how tension compression works in the human body and the very natural ways of the myofascial tissue. And Paul, I wonder if before we go into the actual techniques that we're going to do, 3 lovely and quite simple exercises that you can do for yourself.
Mhm.
I just wondered if you would share with us some of your experience of working with this. We've already talked about this in detail in the other session. We'll put a link to that in this video, but just a quick overview of why it's so important and why you've chosen the 3 movement sequences that you've chosen.
Well, quite frankly, it's a very, very all too common predicament as so many women find themselves in, and God bless them. And they're desperate to retain or restore that elastic body that they had that has had to gone through the whole rigors of becoming pregnant, going through the pregnancy, and then giving birth, and having the whole life turned upside down. And then realizing that they've got this space in between where there used to be this lovely tummy. And it really is for them quite off-putting, and it's quite a concern aesthetically more than anything a lot of the time. But yes, it does have other foundational influences on integrity of everything. But the thing is not to be over concerned, because people get really obsessed with trying to fix something that's not really broken, because of we now have a much more clear understanding of how this living fabric that we are is designed to go through the rigors of change and morphology. And that explains how things change shape and transform during various phases of our life and various circumstances that we take ourselves through, like pregnancy and postnatal issues. So the thing is to not worry so much. That's the first thing. Take away the anxiety of what it looks like and know that it's a normal occurrence. Because in the room, everybody's so desperate to have strong abs. It's almost like it's a industry standard now. The harder your abs are, and the more able and rigid you can keep your lower back, then everything else will be good with all of your movement. And that, quite frankly, is simply not true. Because the harder you make this region, the less capable and less movement you are going to allow yourself to take part within, because it adds a very restrictive outcome to your movement shape.
I'm going to pick you up on that because I just have a prayer. It is a prayer, Paul. And it's a prayer that we can accept ourselves the way that we are.
Yeah.
You know, I have people terribly upset about stretch marks, about uh, kind of hiding the fact that they may have had a C-section, and that scar tissue has huge impact and effect on the rest of the body. And when we can bring people to a place of being at ease with the, you know, the war wounds, if you like, of going through pregnancy, and if you haven't got stretch marks on the outside, good luck to you. I promise you've got them on the inside.
Correct.
Because we've seen them so many times. But I want to say that being able to have a child and going through that process in many, many ways is a blessing.
Oh.
And I wish our culture was more forgiving and more naturally aware of the softness, of the curvature of the feminine body, we've had our conversations about core. We won't go down that at the moment, but the middle of the body is designed to soften and allow and expand for that process of childbirth
And
and
nurturing.
nurturing. Exactly. And so it's like I really I really invite you to just take a moment and let go of the judgments and the concerns and the anxiety attached to those judgments, that you are the wrong shape or you're out of shape, and understand that you are expressing the morphology of a very beautiful process and that we actually can help reestablish a useful, powerful, resourceful system. And you may not be next week's catwalk model, but if only the catwalk could reflect real life, I think that would be gorgeous, don't you? I'm not criticizing the models, they're fabulous. They're just fabulous. I love them all. But without judging anybody, can we be inclusive with ourselves when we don't look like whatever our model icon is? It's just an appeal to lovingly forgive yourself, because I know we're starting with a technique which is one that we go inside a little bit. It's just a little bit more, hang on, let's get ourselves present.
But I think a lot of people don't want to face the vulnerability of going inside because they're so afraid, or they have such anxiety about what they see on the outside. And it is this actual judgmental society we live in now, where we hold
Mm.
ourselves to such standards that are unreasonable. And every time you achieve a goal, you move the goalposts and you make your life much harder than it needs to be to meet somebody else's expectations of what you should look like or what you should appear like to your company or your community or your partner and friends. So the thing is, listen, your body's designed to change shape. It's designed to do the most incredible things, like having a baby. But there's a consequence to that. How is your tissue prepared for going through that process, and how will it recover after? Well, let me tell you, it's designed to do it. So it knows everything it already needs to. The ingredients are right there. You just need to know how to organize them and create the right catalyst so that those characteristics can naturally stimulate themselves and create this restorative, elastic recoiling of this space that has been produced by expanding. And some people will recover all the way, and it's as if you never had a baby at all, and some will be left with a slight gap. But it doesn't mean you become less capable or you have less functionality. You just happen to have, like you say, these life scars of living. And it's not a horrible scar, it's not a pirate scar. You didn't lose a limb. What you've done is you've expanded and you've changed shape. And because you've changed shape, you have grown into a new version of yourself. And that has to accommodate the new lifestyle and life responsibilities you have now got to undertake as a mother or a partner of a mother. And we must be really considerate and understand that your body is always adapting to circumstances and life's expectations of us. So we're not trying to override its natural characteristics. We're trying to enhance them and stimulate them and encourage them to behave naturally in an unnatural society and environment we find ourselves within.
I love that. And, you know, I talk about that in my new book, Myofascial Magic in Action. The wonderful Dr. Karen Kirkness, this is my version with all its
Mm.
bits of paper hanging out, but the wonderful Karen Kirkness, Paul Thornley as well, Dr. Wilbur Kelsick, John Sharkey, and Helen Eady have all written chapters, each one on one of the 5 R's. And Karen's on the R of recoil goes into what actually happens inside the female body and how brilliantly and amazingly the uterus recoils into its original shape. And as you said, Paul, it's kind of born knowing what to do. And we can get in the way when we impose these ideas, these outside judgments on ourselves, on others, of how we should look. So regardless of who's who and who's the partner, who's the mother, who's the, you know, however that is, let's look at 3 techniques for honoring the way that you are after having transformed your life by creating and nurturing or facilitating another life to self-organize into being. So over to you, Paul. What's the first technique?
Well, again, let's make things realistic. Like, your perspective of reality needs to be realistic. If you're a mother and you're busy and you're a partner and you're a job, you're not in the gym for 8 hours a day. but you have the body 24 hours a day. It's yours. It's with you. The very gym you need to work in is already with you, yourself. So be kind and be patient and do little more frequently rather than a lot infrequently. Make sense? Rather you try to aspire to be the instructor you see and try to restore their natural shape because they're pre and postnatal specialists. They've had 15 kids and they've got the body of an Olympic athlete. It's because they train like an Olympian and they're in that environment all the time. You're at home, you're in your office, you're in your normal life dealing with you. So the first thing that we have to really address, and it's really important, that your body has one major concern. It must be able to breathe. And if we don't allow that to be our primary essence of living, what is the quality and style of my breath when I'm under stress or I'm feeling joyful, and you don't know the impact of it, then you're missing out on your greatest ally and friend that is always accompanying you through all of these circumstances. So if you can just take your mind back to something much more simply, it will have such a dramatic internal influence on the external visual representation you're looking to see. And as we know, all of your tissue has elastic properties. If you can get it to expand, it will want to contract. If you can get it to expand and create more volume, it will appreciate the space that's available. It will help you maintain it, contain that pressure appropriately, and you'll get this rhythmic recoiling of all the tissue in all directions. So what you're looking to do is make sure that you breathe with purpose and be purposeful in your approach to breathing. But don't do a lot of it. Just do 1 minute in an hour. And 1 minute of breathing should equate to almost maybe 6 or 7 full breath cycles. And the way we do that is going to promote this full expansion of you externally. And you'll create this internal response to creating space and volume. And as you breathe out fully, then the reverse will, of course, happen. The volume and space will shorten and shrinken and change. And the compressive element will increase just enough to stimulate the next tensional response to take your next breath. And it's just
So you actually have, we could call that an internal rebounding breath in a way.
Rebounding happens naturally, but we're trying to stimulate a better quality of rebounding of our breathing and its effect on our structure and our living fabric.
Beautiful. Do you want to talk us through, we're going to do this now together, the rebound breath?
Yeah, it should be very vibrant. So you want to sit as tall as you can, but without being rigid. There shouldn't feel like there's any restriction in your back. So if you need to be cushioned, do, but try not to slouch. You want to put your posture in such a way that it feels invigorated to be upright, but not already fatigued. You put your hands on the desk or on your thighs, and you encourage a downward pressure through you to create an inward vertical response. And then we're literally just going to imagine you're opening an umbrella and all of the spokes opening all directions immediately and simultaneously. That's what you're trying to stimulate with your inhale. So all you do first is just take a very small breath in and then breathe out for as long as you can. Like you're blowing out through a straw, as if you're just trying to make the flame on a candle just out of reach. It should just flicker and start to bend away from you. You're not trying to blow it out. Once you've got that and you finish your breath out, then you have the opportunity to take your first full breath in. And once you've done your first, then blow it all the way out.
Still blowing out, but only bending the flame, right?
Exactly. You're not trying to make it fast. It should be very smooth. So my cue is breathe in for as long as you can to feel that
Through the nose.
expansion through your nose and both nostrils if possible. And then you breathe out through your mouth for longer because you're not trying to stimulate any actual activity or movement sequence except to increase volume and tensional response to the effect of the breath. And that does exactly the same on the fabric in your abdominal wall in that linea alba. As you're inhaling, this will happen. As you breathe out, it will want to come back. And the more rhythmic you make the breath, the more rhythmic you'll feel the expansion of your skin and the beneath architecture of that skin, which is your superficial fascia and subcutaneous tissue. And of course, then you go into the deep tissue of the muscles, and they're all doing the same rhythmic response to the breath rhythmically.
But just one addition to that, we're also massaging all the organs, aren't we? We're restoring the internal organization, the uterus, and all the other viscera.
Yes.
And we're really using that whole abdominal compartment. We're almost gently massaging it. So for those of you that are not watching us on YouTube, those of you that are listening to this in a podcast, whatever you're doing, And obviously, be safe. If you're driving, consider doing this later because it might distract you. You are very, very gently resting your tongue on the roof of your mouth. You are inhaling fully, 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 fully like an umbrella in 360 degrees. And then you purse your lips as if you are going to blow out a candle, but you don't. You bend the flame
Mhm.
and breathe out for longer. And Paul is recommending that you do that for 1 minute on the hour rather than several times and then forget about it for 24 hours. Is that correct, Paul?
Yeah, because you need the frequency of change to allow adaptation of your tissue to transform via that opportunity to change, as opposed to the infrequent nature of exercise, which is 1 hour once a day or 3 or 4 times a week. It's the time frame is not fair in the expectation of challenging what's happened to you and this need and desperation to restore its integrity. So it's more frequent, but less of it is more achievable.
Got it. And it's an incremental build into the tissue of, if you like, a new habit in a way where you're simply inviting yourself to be very kind to yourself on
Yeah.
the inside
Yeah.
and use something completely natural to you, something completely innate to animate that loving,
Mhm.
it's almost an inner caress, isn't it? Your exhale, that slow bending of that candle, it actually calms your nervous system,
Yeah.
it calms your breathing rate, it increases heart rate variability because the heart is just sitting on top of the diaphragm. It's being massaged by the lungs. It's actually a very, very loving exhale, bending that flame, not blowing it out.
Imagine a crowded terrace on a football field or any, if you're going to watch a band, you can imagine the amount of people that are compressed into a space. And imagine all those people never making contact. And as the tune and the rhythm is introduced to them, they all expand a little bit. They all come back together, but they never clash. That's the effect of this breath on your organs. And that expansion and that volume increase is what pulls them and makes them rhythmically milk each other and create this symbiotic relationship as they all function and improve their functionality and relationship with each other through the cycle of what they must produce every moment of every day of your life. But if you allow things to compress and focus on compressing, then imagine all those people on the terrace or within the crowd, they're all joined together and there's no room to
You're
maneuver.
being pushed together. It's quite frightening, right?
When you get
And what do? They defend themselves to stop themselves from being
you
crushed.
get panic. You go into a panic, you create more anxiety because there's desperate need to tighten things. And this tightening things to compress and compression biased approach to anything is what creates more anxiety and amplifies the issue you're currently in. So it's this freedom and this exploration and curiosity for space is what's going to enhance the tightening of the fabric you're really seeking. But you just didn't know that you knew it, but it's naturally there. And you're absolutely right. If you want to call it a massaging your internal visual, that's delicious because they're becoming in their own rhythm and they're restoring a better relationship with each other within the confines of you because they all have to have this freedom to maneuver so that they can perform and function properly.
And we're really animating the fluid body, aren't we, from the inside? Because we know there are no real spaces in the body. Everything, the nature abhors a vacuum. So what's actually inside us is what Neil Thies coined the term interstitium, and his colleague Rebecca Wells. And basically, what we're doing is we're breathing the interstitium, the in between, the fluid matrix, the extracellular matrix, all these aspects of our fluid body. It's all part of the fascial matrix. And what we're doing is we're massaging, aren't we? Literally, the inside, but keeping the appropriate interfaces between the viscera, and we're allowing them to feel sort of gently nurtured by their own fluid environment rather than squishing it so hard, squeezing that fluid out and holding our breath and trying to pump the body into these positions that are so compressive, they're exhausting, they're forceful, and the body just does what you would do if somebody was compressing and forcing you. You fold your arms, you take a stance, you bury your heels in, and you either curl up in a ball in fear or you just stand there and say, no, I'm not playing. And that's the kind of resistance that I think we come up against when people are struggling with crunches or holding
But here's the
patterns.
thing. Let's explain this to the audience clearly. If compression wins, you lose. In any environment, if the compressive force is the dominant force and you don't have the capacity to meet and match it with a really beautiful, natural, tensional response, then you don't have rhythmic reaction to each other and they don't harmonize. If compression wins, everything loses and your movement will suffer and your tissue will become dehydrated, and those interstitial fluids and that visceral organs that must harmonize and the very space you're trying to influence how it restores its capability and it transforms so that you can perform better is taken away from you. Ask any mouse that's been in a mousetrap. If compression wins, it's dead. That happens to your cells, it happens to your organs. If there's overpressure and there's no way to alleviate that pressure, you panic and it struggles and invariably they die. And I equate a bench press to a mouse trap. If it's overweight, you have to pause and you hold your breath to push. And then you're trying to find the energy from somewhere to get out of this compressive prison that you put your body into. And that's exactly the same as when you do a crunch or a sit-up or a plank. You increase the compressive nature of that position in the aspiration of that compressive nature, making it harder and firmer, restoring the natural fluid characteristics of a vibrant omnidirectional tissue. And what unfortunately does, under extreme pressures, everything collapses. That's the natural response to pressure in a human body. And the natural compression, everything can only got one other option from here, to give in. And that's why people's tissue doesn't restore as quickly as they'd like to, because they attack it with this aspiration of making it stronger, more vibrant, more elastic, and return and shorten that gap. And it's a losing battle. So if you just try the reverse, we don't want to go as extreme as over-tensioning, like you're not trying to be a ballerina. And if you are, you want to shorten if you're a ballerina, but that's another conversation. But you want to feel like you're expanding to access that natural sensual feeling that you've gone far enough and that you want to come back. So those motions are always in diagonal or spiral. So the movements you want to incorporate with your breath are naturally spiraling because you spiral as you lift. You can feel yourself want to turn as you breathe in. There's a natural spiraling architecture of our body, and you'll experience it when you sit vertical and you breathe in fully. And as you do this, your tissue will expand and your clothes, look, they get firmer as my body fills the space between the clothes and my skin. I expand and I make it more taut. That's what happens with the tissue that you're trying to influence in diastasis recti. What I don't want to do is now collapse. I want it to stay up and vibrantly respond to these invitation and introduction of this lovely breath formulating force. So it's a rhythmic force rather than an aggressive attacking force. It's your
Love it.
eye.
And the fascia is a force transmission system. So it's understanding how these forces move through us. And what you've just given us is a beautiful segue into our next
Correct.
tip, which is rotation.
Yes.
Now we know that the fascial tissue, it has a spiral formation.
Mhm.
And we also know that there's a lot of people out there studying movement who do it based in spirals.
Mhm.
We're not questioning that at all. But that doesn't mean you can't stand up straight, sit up straight, get out of your chair, up and down using gravity, because it moves through the tissue in its own configuration. We don't have to be in spiral shapes in order for spiral motion to take place through us, because our tissue is already based on something called spirality and chirality. That's another conversation as well. We've got other YouTube clips about that. Karen Kirkness, the chirality queen, explains it beautifully in her book Spiral Bound. But right now, what we want to do is honor the rotation of the body and honor its natural expression. We don't have to force it. We don't have to override it. What we're doing with this beautiful, gentle breathing is encouraging our natural reflexes. Over to you, Paul, for rotation number 2.
Well, we are a round thing on a round planet. Yes, moving in a round and spiraling universe. So why would
Amen.
we can't help but be round and spiral within our environment because it's what you are. Can you?
We're already doing
No,
it. This is
well,
amen. I mean,
you can't do it any other way. You can try to be rigid and stiff. You can try to be military and linear, but your body is resisting it, which is why people find themselves in these damn predicaments, because you're trying to stop your natural spiraling shape and architecture from that nature gave you, that you were born into and from a spiraling network. It was a gift. You're not a box inside here. It's a round embryo in a round embryotic world. What are you talking about? Do linear work? Of course you're round. And you come out in a round way. those who've seen babies pop out, they don't come out and drop and a parachute. They turn. They turn and spiral out into existence. It's beautiful to watch. So those movements you just forgot were brilliant and natural, and you have to reintegrate them into your day. And here's how you do it. You take that breath that you've just done. If the movement prevents your ability to breathe, it's too big, too aggressive, too hard, and inappropriate. You must be able to breathe fluidly throughout your experience now that you're going to introduce to your body. And that's your barometer. That's how you know you're progressing and getting better and having a more profound effect on your shape and this dynamic fabric you're trying to influence. If you find that you're threatening it, the movement threatens, and your breath reflects that by holding it or becoming more shallower or more erratic, you need to stop what you're doing and have a rethink about where you're going.
I love you saying that, Paul, and I really want to underline it with a little highlight pen for everybody that's listening. If it's too much, it's not because you're weak, it's not because you can't do it, it's because your body's saying, that's a little bit more than I can manage right now. So listen in, tune in to that magical voice inside of you. It's your fascia. It's a listening system. It's a listening network, and it's responding to you under the rules of something called haptic perception. We go into that in another video. But right now, just understand it's saying to you, please be kind. Please be kind. And that doesn't mean namby-pamby, loose, wet, bleh. It means that a lot of our exercise programs and our boot camps were designed in the army using army recruits to do the tests and the research on. We're not talking about that. We are talking about somebody who's had a baby, who's now struggling with another living being that absolutely depends on them. Be kind to you, just as a footnote. So you've done your breathing, and now you're going to do your really gentle rotation. And if it feels too much, dial it down, knowing that when you get stronger and more confident in your own kindness to yourself, you will be able to express these movements. Paul has been working for many, many years. He's worked with postnatal departments in the hospital. He's worked with matrons and staff nurses that work with women postpartum, and he's learned his work in the field, making this difference. So, Paul, what is your recommendation, given that we're on YouTube and no one's in our classes or workshops, but what would you give away as your best tip for simplifying the ability to rotate, the fundamental necessity to rotate?
Is that rotation must be accompanied by counter rotation. So very simply, if you have a bucking and you have a lid, as one element turns in one direction, the other element of the structure must go the opposite way for them to create space. So then the elements separate. And what they do is they create distance, yes? Then they create separation, and now you can park them. You can't do that in a human body unless you have a scalpel and you cut it off. So when you apply the same approach to your human body, that separation because of counter rotation creates a thing between those rotational objects, a thing called dynamic tensioning. And as it dynamically tensions, it wants to dynamically compress. And now you have this rhythmic change, which is what we experienced in the breath, stationary, but now we want to experience it in motion. So quite simply, if I'm sat on my bottom, if you can separate, which we can't, but we're going to, for labeling explanations online, your bum, yes, like a Rubik's Cube, is the base of the cube. It's separated into 3 bits. The rib cage is the middle bit, and the top bit is your neck and your head. And what you want to do is feel that the base of it and your head component remain stationary and facing the same directions forward. And then that you're only going to move the rib cage reciprocally from side to side.
So what you're saying then, Paul, is your base, your sitting bones, stay still in the chair, kind of knees facing forward, feet flat on the floor.
Just sat up straight, but literally from breathing.
Nice and tall.
Yeah, not really.
And your face is facing forward. And so your sitting bones are down, the base is down, the pubic bone is facing front, the forehead and the face are facing front.
Yep.
And the only thing that's actually going to be doing the moving is the rib cage.
Yep.
Yes.
Let's make it very simple. You don't have to over complicate this at all. You just sat up straight. You're facing forward like you would watching TV, but instead of slouching, you're just vertical. Your feet on the floor underneath you, ideally in a chair rather than sat on your bum with your legs crossed. Because you need space to access this lovely rhythm and this relationship building you're going to encourage and foster within the movement. Not that you can't do it there, But that would be another element to approach. But right now, we want to be sit on a chair, feet are beneath you, so you can sit nicely, easy. So a sense of ease of movement, not a sense of achievement. Then you just cross your hands very gently. So you take away the effort of having to over position your shoulders and your arms and the weight of them. Just rest them on your chest. And you literally just start turning. And I turn to the right, and then I turn to the left. And what you'll do is you do it, of course, you're because you're moving and you're keeping your eye line and your nose facing straight ahead. And you're trying to keep your hips relatively still, but don't concrete them. They're allowed to move. And you'll feel your femur bones moving forward and back now as you're doing this, because you're moving your seat, but you're not pivoting in one direction. If everything goes the same direction, head, chest, pelvis, that's called pivoting. But if I'm moving my ribs and I'm feeling my hips react and resist slightly, and as my neck and head is doing the same, they're resisting to go the opposite way to prevent that pivoting, you then get counter rotation. And what happens inside the body? You get that space. You introduce space within the virtual spaces of your bones and your skeletal and your ligamentous tissue. And as they pull apart through rotation, they naturally come together to allow you to go the opposite way and elastically return and travel the other way naturally. And you'll feel you like one side more than the other. I love going to the left. I really don't like going to the right at all. But it's important that I can do both to some element or degree of finesse.
Beautiful. So to really simplify this, the thigh bones, the feet are under the knees are in front of us, the base is on the chair, and I'm sitting nice and tall, and I've got my face forward. I've got my arms crossed at my breastbone, and my hands are just, my fingertips are on the opposite shoulders. And literally all I'm doing is swinging or rotating my torso, my rib basket in rotation and counter rotation, while my nose faces forward and my sitting bones stay where they are. And what I'm finding is I have to make that movement quite small. I tend to push myself too far.
Yeah, don't we all?
And I'm going, there's natural, it's yoga teacher's way, is to go, how far can I go? How far can I go? Well, I'm having to make that smaller so that it doesn't hurt me. And while I'm doing that as well, I'm finding that my thigh bones, femur bones, are wanting to move
They
in
shift,
response.
right? They're
My
shifting.
body thinks exactly. It feels like they're shifting in my thighs. It feels like they're going, well, come on then, let's go for a walk. It's almost like there's
Well,
an
that's
eagerness
exactly
to walk.
that's exactly right. And this is the thing. Think of the pregnant lady who has now had a baby. Now she's postpartum. She has got all of this laxity within her if she's still breastfeeding. So it's important that we're not trying to go so far in a such huge rotation. You just want to feel it, that there is a natural boundary to turning, and don't exceed it, because if you exceed a boundary, you collapse into it. But if you recognize a boundary, a limitation that you can feel it initially, depending on the tempo, you recognize it, then you just come back from it and go to the other side and feel that boundary. And those boundaries will be slightly different. If you look at a clock, if you start at 12, maybe you'll get to 10 or 9 on one side. You might only get to 1 or 2 on the other. Maybe you'll go further. But respect that there's differences and just allow and enjoy them and honor them. And then it becomes very rhythmic. And exactly now, so now if you can feel this and you're now incorporating your breath, now you'll feel really true counter-rotating chirality of these tensional tissues around your waistline. So think of the tissues as they go away, they want to pull back together and they transfer go the opposite way like this. This is what's happening around your linea alba where you're experiencing diastasis recti, which is why the linear work doesn't do that, because it just folds on itself forward and it doesn't tension the space that you're trying to restore its relationship through. What it does, it gives into that space and it creates a bigger space and an opportunity for things to bulge out from behind. But when you
Of course, it causes herniation.
of course,
It causes herniation.
that's of course that's the end stage of it. But we want to encourage none of those things. We want to feel like as we train it, we're pulling this fabric. One will go down towards your thigh, the opposite will go up towards your armpit, and vice versa. They'll come back through and go the opposite way. And it's that lovely rhythmic pulling in this diagonal spiraling rotational configuration that allows you to move effortlessly. And it's the secret motion that we forget and take for granted in our bodies, that when we're walking or moving or lifting or running or training, we forget to turn our body.
So important. And what I just want to emphasize to everybody, those of you that know your anatomy, what you're activating are your obliques and your whole spiral nature to make the tube of your lower torso very gently, very lovingly remember what it's there for. And you're stimulating it to start restoring itself. So, Paul, given that this almost naturally, and it accumulates, I must tell you,
Sure.
almost naturally animates this feeling that my legs are sort of going, well, why don't we get up and
Right.
walk? Would that be number three?
It's exactly that. It's a natural progression to the movement experience you're doing. If you're breathing better and you're moving more consistently and fluidly, you want to then move wholly. You want to move fully. And unfortunately, I know as inconvenient as walking is, it is the barometer of a healthy person over a sedentary one. You can go to the gym and train your butt and have great ginormous glutes and great thighs. But what's the point in creating this great aesthetic look and potential if you then go and sit down and don't move and walk powerfully, elegantly, gracefully, with this great rhythm and integrate your whole body as a human being is designed to move, which is through our legs. And that's why it's important that we're striding. So what you do, you take this lovely rhythmic motion accompanied by your best friend and your companion, your breath, and then you stride confidently. So no short shuffles of your legs where you go really fast with your legs. Okay, because that will prevent and inhibit the rotation that you've just incorporated into your body again. What you want is a really long stride, heel to toe, toe to heel. Think of it that way, as long as you can, comfortably. And the longer it is, and the more fluid you make the stride, the more natural you'll feel you incorporate a counter rotating torso towards the leading leg. So, for instance, if my left leg is in front of me and I'm striding and I'm pushing off my right leg behind me, my body will turn to the left, but my eye line remains forward. And that's what keeps the height. And that's what amplifies that lovely dynamic fabric tensioning in rotation. And of course, as I stride, because I've now created an added locomotive sensation, I'm moving, I'm propelling myself forward. As I change legs, my rotation will naturally transfer to the other side and go to the reciprocal direction. And now I swing the arms and I find this effortless recoiling motion. And you're walking powerfully, but without ever fatiguing. There's tissue that is designed to do this rhythmically, naturally. And again, it's just recognizing these characteristics are already in you. They're already in the blueprint of this fabric. You're just reawakening them to what they can already do. You just took it away from them. You took that responsibility away in your need to make it hard, make it rhythmic, and it will become taut and powerful and rhythmic and aesthetically beautiful.
So, just to emphasize, when you're practicing this, and I often get people to walk on the spot just for a little bit so they get used to the fact that when the right shoulder comes forward,
Yep.
it's to meet the left
Left leg,
knee.
yeah.
And when the right knee comes forward,
Yes,
left shoulder.
correct.
And sometimes we have to spend a little bit of time coordinating. So I get people to tap right hand to left knee, left hand to right knee, and they stand there doing that. Another key, which I know you always share with people, is rather than walking with your feet hip width apart, you're walking in a slight swinging motion. So you place each foot in front of each other a little bit more as if you were on a wide tightrope.
Yes,
So you're not balancing and wobbling from side to side. Don't think, oh my God, I could fall. You're literally swinging, say, the right leg to a place in front of the left foot that's pushing off, but the opposite shoulder would be coming towards it. So we'd be practicing this first by sitting with the sitting rotations. So we get used to it
mhm,
and we'd start feeling that the motion is counterchiral in the seated position. And then when we stand up, it's right hand to left knee, left hand to right knee. And we get used to that marching on the spot, perhaps as an interim, as a join the dots. And then we move into walking with this counterchiral movement. It basically means swinging your arms. And whichever foot is going forward, the other arm is swinging to meet it. You don't have to mince down the seafront as if you were about to go on a catwalk and get everybody watching you. You literally are in a lovely, soft swing. And I was doing this the other day, Paul, I must tell you, and it's dreadful weather in the UK at this moment in time. We're in January 25 while we record this, but you might be listening at another time and in another country with a different climate. But I was wearing like a ski jacket, and I could hear this whoosh, 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 whoosh as I let the spiral
mhm.
animate the sleeves of my coat and the torso of my jacket on the clothing that I had on underneath. And I realized that that's actually what was happening to the fabric of my form within my body. And it really made me feel very bubbly and light, and I found I had more bounce in my feet, I had more natural recoil, I started to feel quite happy, I swear my crown went up, and it was actually joyful.
Yep. It is joyful. And that's the whole nature of walking. It should be a fun activity, not a torturous time that you have to endure. And the fact is, we just got all really comfortable in our lives and comfortable in our various situations around the world, that walking has become like, oh, do I have to? I have to walk to the shop. I have to walk the kids to school. I have to walk to meet my friends. And it's really important that we don't lose the ability to walk, because the less you walk, the less you animate these fabric relationships internally, and the less you glide, not only externally, but internally. And then things start to create friction and inflammation, and all of the very things you're trying to perform well become a lot harder to achieve. And you achieve them less because you get bloody injured. So walk beautifully, bounce along, stride along confidently with a big smile on your face in any weather. Don't let the weather intimidate you. If it's raining, put a hat on. If it's windy, place a scarf. If it's hot, go out half naked. But get walking, because without walking properly and purposely, yes, then these tissues don't know how to maintain the relationship with inside you so that they can restore that natural characteristic usefulness of them. So they're performing functionally to your natural blueprint. Because the more functional they are, the less opportunity they get to become dysfunctional. Because walking is the currency of life. If you breathe well and you move well, you get the chance to do anything else in your life. You can go and exercise as much as you want. You can read a book as much as you want. You can go out and interact with as many people as you want. But the minute you can't get out of your chair well, and you let your movement style inhibit your experience and opportunities outside and external to your home, life gets really lonely and a bit miserable.
So I wanted to just add one little tiny piece to this, Paul, because I have a lot of clients that love to run,
Yep.
and I also have clients that can't walk. So what I want to say to them is please still do this rotational piece when you're sitting, even if you're sitting in a wheelchair, because as I said at the beginning, what you'll feel are the femurs are animated. And what we're looking at, even if it's at a lower frequency and it takes longer, is still this beautiful support structure in the seated position, that the lungs are animated, the torso, and the torso is animating the lungs. And what we're doing is we're not forcing, we're inviting the restoring of our spiral chiral blueprint. And if you are a runner, in my experience, I have runners where I'm working with them and it's almost like the body, based on sort of levers and how a robot might run, is this very heavy footfall, and the torso's being carried along like a passenger on the legs, which is Serge Grakovetsky's phrase.
Right.
And his work is absolutely beautiful, by the way. Anybody out there wants to read about the spinal engine. And he talks about how it's this chirality, these spiral motions of the spine that drive the legs, and the legs just use the ground for ground reaction force. And I think what you're doing here, when we bring this walking, it almost naturally turns into a very light running gait that's very, very different from some of the standards that are drilled into us in the boot camps. And all my clients have just had fantastic results. I'm talking about 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds running marathons better at 50 than they did at 40, just because they're incorporating these principles of letting the body do what it's naturally designed to do. And it's a struggle at first, because I'm not an Olympic athlete, I'm not an elite anything, but I totally understand this internal chirality and how it makes that difference. And I think that diastasis recti is the first thing we want to nurture slowly, gently, and bringing all these pelvic floor issues. And it leads us into another episode that we talk about, the pelvic foot. Because if you get this foot strike right when you're walking, it will change into your running. We'll do another episode on running, and you will start to transform from the ground up using ground reaction force through your fascia, which is a force transmitting tissue. And as you said so beautifully, Paul, there's two forces, tension and compression. And if compression wins, we lose. If tension wins, we overstretch, actually, we can also lose. But if we
Oh,
can find the balance between tension and compression, we start the magic of myofascial movement in action.
well, if you overtension, your body stimulates a compressive reaction to defend you.
Yeah. So then you then you hurt, right?
So you stimulate an overcompressive reaction in either way. That's the whole point, right? Compression wins in every sphere when you keep inviting it. It's important that you respond to compression by recognizing your tensional biased being. Like when you're a baby, you roll over. You don't stand up. You roll. You find a way to shake your round head on the flat floor, and you find a way to turn over. Yes, when
Amen.
you're in a chair and say and we say, have they turned in their grave? At all phases of baby to death, we're always talking about turning. However, like Sturge work about the spiral engine and it stimulates your legs. Well, we've reversed that because we don't move our bodies anymore. There's no spiraling spines in the vast majority of exercise modalities. It's all from the legs, and it buggers up your spine because you limit its natural rotational shape and form, and it's just designed naturally by itself to do that. We just inhibit it with our desperation to look certain ways in a flat mirror in a two-dimensional world. And it's really important that we animate all of you all of the time as often as you can.
In the most subtle ways. You do not need to restrict yourself to spiral motion. This is about animating through the up, the down in multi directions. We're multi-directional, we're omnidirectional. And honestly, Paul, if I had one strap line in my life, I was at a huge conference where they were talking about Olympic athletes and shod or unshod and how we should move and biomechanics. You know, my whole beef about that. And I remember Dr. Wilbur Kelsick, just looked at me and he just said, "What's the matter, Joanne?" And I just went, "We're round. We're round things living on a round planet, surrounded and grounded because of gravity. That's it. End of. And all of this has got nothing to do with round things. You cannot, I don't care how hard you work, I don't care how many degrees you've got in biomechanics, the human body is not mechanical.
So in short,
Rounded, grounded, surrounded, and I just love it because this is the strap line. If I have a strap line, it's we're round.
so bringing it back to Diastasis Recti at the zip of my jacket,
Yep.
this is a linear, straight line outcome, and an heiress become the victim of not moving in the round. And the more you stay linear, the longer you'll keep this space and this deformation of this morphology that's happened to you throughout your pregnancy and beyond. And to make this close, I need to pull these apart. And they will naturally respond to that tension between them and come together. And that's what happens. Just like the zip, if that zip went all the way down to my groin, to make it close, I need to pull it sideways and diagonally and within the round, rather than do this linear motion, which is, of course, the classical approach to diastasis recti.
But we don't mean pull as in pull apart. What we mean is very, very gently tension to animate this spring-loaded compression in the body naturally, and it does it at the counterforce to the force. So if you're gentle, it will gently do it. And what we're saying is you incrementally introduce this process, and the body will then take over on its own and be invited to restore as optimally as it can. And we're just asking you to be kind, to listen, to take your time, and to work in micro movements. Paul, thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. 1, breathing. 2, seated rotation. 3, if you can, walking. And think always, always, always spirals, chirals, counter spirals, and kindness.
And enjoy being a mother. Good luck.
God bless you all. Love and light from me and Paul. Bye, Paul.
Take care. Bye-bye.